All right, it is February 15th, 2023, 8:06 p.m. Yay! Buenos Pina night classes. Okay, so last time, we did ABCs last time, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's put it up on the board so you can see it, because once we got up there, we can build on it. A of Judaism, we said, was that you need to be intellectually humble. You have to conceive of the possibility that you can be wrong, and so you'll ask questions, and you'll be open to the truth. Ultimately, intellectually humble is the same thing as being a truth seeker. Right? That's what that means. If you are a truth seeker, then you will have intellectual humility. Right? Because if you're not humble, that means you think you already have truth. That means you don't need to look for it more. You're not a truth seeker. So then we said, what's the most important truth we can possibly search after? Right? We said is, does life have purpose? Okay? And, of course, along with that is, and if so, what is it? And now we also mentioned that the flip side of that one is, right, does Hashem exist? Is there a creator? And we talked a little bit about the fact that that's really saying the same thing. If there is a creator, life could have purpose, because the creator can give it purpose. If there's no creator, then there's no purpose. So the two go hand in hand. And then we mentioned what that purpose is, according to Judaism, in a nutshell. Right? We did mention it, right? We're created for the ultimate pleasure of connecting to Hashem. Right? Created for the ultimate pleasure of connecting to Hashem. It sounds like, Rabbi, you're making that up. Is that Kiruv Torah? It's like it's from Chal. It's just Mesilas Yesharim. It's like the first paragraph. It's very explicitly stated in our sources of connecting to Hashem. Right? And then the C we said was, what is Torah? Torah is the instruction manual. Torah is Chaim, instructions for life. Right? On how to, basically do all that. Right? So what is my purpose? How do I get to it? Etc., etc. Okay, good. So this is a very quick review of our first session. Now what I generally like to do is I say, okay, now that we've got this, let's, what's the computer expression? Like double click, right? We're going to zoom in on these and try to explore them more fully. So we're going to start off with A, right? So the question that we're really asking, ultimately, we're searching for truth, right? So what do you need to, at the end of the day, what do you need to know or have certainty or confidence about?
That the truth you're seeking is the ultimate truth.
That's kind of an assumption. That's what we would call, in philosophy, we would call that the axiom, the given. Of course we're looking for the ultimate truth, right? That's not something that you could really even determine while you're looking for it. But there is something you can think through and determine.
If there's evidence? If there's evidence?
And why do you care if there's evidence?
Evidence means it could be proved.
It's a logic.
And therefore what? What does that mean, proved evidence? At the end of the day, what are you trying to get?
It's reality.
Good. And what do we call it when you have a grasp of what's real?
Truth.
Well, that is the truth. But what do you have it when you have a grasp of that truth?
It's knowing.
Good. Knowledge. Right. So the real question is, how do we know what's true? Or what's real? True/real. How do you know? It's a funny thing that we can go our whole lives and people will use the word truth, and yet very rarely people sit down and go, what is truth and how can you know it? And for the ultimate truth is Hashem himself. Hashem Elokeichem Emes. Right? So you're right, that is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do. But how can you know? How can you be grasped? How can you be certain? What if you're wrong? Right? Like, the doubts creep in. How do you, push the doubts away with knowledge? We always have doubts. The rabbis called this world the Alma Deseko, the world of doubt. Right? So doubts are a normal part of life. The question is, how do you deal with them? How are you able to systematically approach the problem of knowledge? Okay, so let me give you. Sorry, that's fine. Let me give you an illustration. Shalom, shalom. Welcome. So let me give you an illustration.
Hello.
What are these guys? Chop liver? Like, what do you mean? What is everybody? Like, oh my God.
We just wanted this to be us.
Okay. There's room in the front. You don't have to.
We're shy.
All right. It's like, this is not like, you're not like blacks in the South getting on a bus. You don't have to get the back. It's okay. You can go in the front. Okay. Let me give you an illustration of this idea. There's a story is told about this guy. What was his name? It was Josh Pearl. I think his name is Josh Pearl, if I remember correctly. Josh Pearl. He is vacationing in Yerushalayim. He's like, oh, this is so great. I'm really loving it here. This is amazing. And he notices that there's like a store, and it says, a storefront, and it says, Josh Pearl Accounting. He's like, that's so crazy. My name is Josh Pearl, and I'm an accountant, and here I am in Yerushalayim, and there's Josh Pearl Accountant. That I gotta go meet this guy, right? So he comes in, and he says, hi, I'm looking for Josh Pearl. And they're like, oh yeah, he's secretary points him, he's right over there, sir. He's like, oh, I was just going out for lunch. What's going on? He goes, my name is also Josh Pearl. What? That's crazy. And I'm also accountant. Get out of here. That is so cool that we're both named Josh Pearl, and we're both accountants. He goes, yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah, like, where are you from? He goes, I'm from Flatbush, Brooklyn. Get out of here. I'm also from Flatbush, Brooklyn. What are the odds that two Josh Pearl accountants can both be from Flatbush, Brooklyn? It's like, well, maybe we're like close by. Where'd you live? He's like, he tells him the address, the street corner. He goes, wait a second. That was my street corner. What's your address? And now they're both kind of freaking out. The guy's like kind of freaking out. He's like, my address is this. This is my address. He goes, okay, something's wrong with you. Like, that's my address. And I was like, no, it's my address. Are you some weird stalker? Like, some people like pretend to be Napoleon. Go away. Yeah, that's a little scary. Unknown is calling me. It's the Sitra Achra. It's trying to stop me.
To sell someone something to use their boss.
Okay, so the Israeli Josh Pearl was like, here's my passport. And the American Josh Pearl was like, oh my God, I lost my passport right now. Like, oh, okay. What's going on over here? He goes, no, call my mother. So they get on the phone. They call the guy's mother in Flatbush. Mom, it's me. There's some guy here in Yerushalayim who's pretending to be me. And she's like, shh, what? Who is this? I can't hear you. And the other guy grabs the phone. Mom, it's me. He's like, Joshy. Now this guy's losing it. He's freaking out. He's like, am I crazy? Am I insane? And did I think I was some guy named Josh Pearl? And it's really him? Like, can you imagine he would start having doubts?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do? Imagine you're him. Are you freaking out a little? Can you feel that? Can you feel that anxiety? You're sitting there and you're like, what do I do? What do you do? Okay, pretend you're a guy named Josh Pearl. What do you do? How do you? It's like, what's a step you could take?
You have to tell your mother something that you don't know about.
Oh, hold on.
Other guy's gonna know.
Well, you say, okay, hold on. You're telling me that you lived on that corner in that house. Okay. Where did you go to school as a kid? He goes, I went to PS, 197. He goes, yeah? What was the name of your third grade math teacher? What was the color of the room? What was in the corner? Right? You start asking detailed questions.
How do you remember those things?
If you think about it, you'll remember stuff from your school.
Yeah, I remember.
You say stuff that you
I
remember.
do.
You know.
I usually remember.
Exactly. That's the whole.
Ninth grade.
No, but they can call up the school, right? Do you have a teacher named this? Can you like this? You could verify that this guy knows details of the life and this guy doesn't, right? So somehow it's a weird conspiracy. Passport got their mother involved. I don't know what's going on here. But the way you break down these conspiracies, the way you break down the doubts, is by going and looking at all of the little bits of evidence. and you weigh those out, right? So a lot of life is like that. You start to have, you know, from a Jewish perspective, you know, you start to have doubts like, does Hashem exist? What does he want from me? Even if he does exist, does he really love us? Right? Were Jewish people chosen for something? You start to have doubts, and that's totally normal. That's a part of life. And people will feed your doubts, right? They'll want you to have doubts, usually because they want to sell you something or they want to get something from you, right? So how do you confront? How do you clarify what you really know? It's going to come down to a lot of evidence. A lot. Few things, not enough. It's another thing. And if you can get evidence coming from multiple different directions, you know, something from history, something from biology, something from psychology, something from philosophy, something from astronomy, and just start bringing, and they all are pointing in the same direction, you can go, is it reasonable that different people from all different fields all together made a worldwide conspiracy to try to fool? No, it becomes untenable, right? I'll give you another way of looking at it, right? Anyone here ever been to China? No one? No. Okay. So how do you know China exists?
There are people that live there.
Okay. Right, so you have Chinese people. Good. How else do you know China exists?
Other people have been there.
So you have witnesses.
Right.
You have Chinese food.
That's not me.
Culture.
Culture.
Maps. Pictures. What was that?
It cannot be fake.
Oh. Okay. So.
It's all just a trick.
Okay, the issue.
Right. So.
Doesn't exist.
That's actually exactly what we're discussing right now. It's very, very good. So imagine if we split.
Pulling together, like making something up with so many people involved.
Right. That's you're both talking on the exact same point beautifully, right? If there's really two alternatives, one. Let me start again. There are two stories. Both stories claim to explain all of the different pieces of evidence. Okay? Story A. How do you explain Chinese people, Chinese food, maps, pictures? Explanation: there is China. Does that explain all of them? Beautifully. It's pretty good. Explanation B. There is no China. How do you explain Chinese people? Maybe they're Japanese. Can you tell the difference? Bunch of white racists. Chinese food, it's really Israeli, right? They're pretending to be Chinese so they could sell better. You know, everything in the world's made in China? No, it's actually made in Korea. Everything, you have to create a scenario where I don't even know how many people are somehow all getting together and agreeing on a fiction to fool you. I will tell you of a really fun and interesting story. This happened, I think, in the 80s or early 90s. They took some college students. You always do good experiments with college students because they're always poor and they need money to get beer, right? So they took some college students and hey, do you guys want to, go on a trip? We'll pay you. But yeah, sure, of course, no problem. So they put them on a plane. They closed all the windows. They didn't let them see out of the window, and they flew. They told them they were flying to China, but they didn't. They flew in a very slow circle, so you couldn't tell the plane was circling. They landed back in New York, and they took them into Chinatown. And they took them to the part of Chinatown that was the most Chinese. All the signs are Chinese. There's no English. And they basically took them out wow, look at Chinatown. And the people were like, whoa, Chinatown. This is not Chinatown. Whoa, China. This is so cool. It kind of smells like New York. Whatever. Right? But most of the people figured it out. Some faster than others. They're wait a second. There's just little details that doesn't quite make sense if you were in China. It makes more sense if you were in America in a place like Chinatown. Right? So those little, again, like the story before with Josh Pearl, those little details start to pull you out of the little kashas, the little difficulties. They add up, and you go, no, this doesn't make sense. I need an alternative. So To explain all of this as a worldwide conspiracy theory designed to make you believe in a place called China despite the fact that it doesn't exist, is that a logical possibility?
Yeah.
Yes. But which is the better answer? China actually exists. Well, how can you tell it really exists? So there's a lot of ways you can tell. I can give you a whole class just on how do you differentiate between good and bad evidence. It's a fascinating discussion. But for now, I'll give you just a couple of points. One, there's a rule in thinking. It's famous. It's called Occam's razor. That's the name of it. Now, Occam's razor, it's named after a Christian thinker from a few hundred years ago named William O. Occam. He didn't say it this way, but it's named after him because the idea comes from him. The way it's said today is that the simplest answer is usually the best answer. Not always, but usually. Why is simple better? Because complicated answers require more moving parts, require more things to be explained. For this to be a worldwide conspiracy theory would require so much more stuff to all fit together perfectly. And nobody let the cat out of the bag. This is why most conspiracy theories are junk. I'm not saying that all of them are junk. I'm not saying that, because conspiracies have happened in human history. But most of the conspiracy theories you see out there are junk because it would require too many people to keep a secret. Human beings are not good at massively keeping secrets. Okay, that's just one example. Fine, let's take away China.
So now it doesn't exist anymore?
Oh, it does. We're there. We came back to China. Oh, you mean, okay, yeah. I didn't get it. Took me a second. Okay. So, I want to take a step back, and I want to be clear that there is two entirely different ways of coming to a feeling of what's true and what's real. Completely different. They bounce off each other, but they're different. One of them is experiential. I know it's true because I experienced it. Have you ever heard the expression, seeing is believing? That's what that means. Because I saw it, I believe it's true. Now, what's the advantage of experiential knowledge?
You know it, but no one else does.
Right. So that is one of the disadvantages. The advantage is it's very real to you. I know it's true because I experienced it. Talking from a Jewish/religious perspective, I know Hashem exists because I feel Him in my life. Right? Is that legitimate? Yes. It's completely legitimate. The problem is it's not transferable. I can't transfer my experience to you because by the very definition of experiential knowledge is only knowledge to the one who experienced it. If I can't give you an experience I had, I can describe it, I can talk to you about it, and maybe you trust me, but that's not the same thing as you having the experience. So experiential knowledge, the advantage of it is that it's visceral. You know what the word visceral means? It literally comes from the word viscera, which means guts. It's like, it's bodily, it's manifested in your being. You're like, there, I feel it in my kidneys, I'm there. I know it's real. The disadvantage is that it's non-transferable. Okay? And is there any other disadvantage to it?
People won't believe you.
Well, that's the non-transferable part. Right. Because I can't transfer it, people may not believe me. And that's fine. But for me, is there any other disadvantage that experiential knowledge has for me?
It might not have been fully real what happened.
True. Maybe I'm fooling myself. It's not always clear if I actually had experiential knowledge or I fooled myself or I was fooled. Right? People tell me this all the time where we're talking, again, from a Torah perspective. Oh, I feel Hashem in my life. I've had people tell me this, and I say to them, that might be, but how do you know that was Hashem that you felt? How do you know? Maybe, have you ever heard of somebody who had an experience that they later found out they misunderstood or was wrong? Has that ever happened to human beings? Of course. So why are you so sure that you're not making a mistake? Human beings for thousands of years thought that the earth was flat because that's how we experience it. But with a little bit of thought and a little bit of evidence, we quickly realized that the earth is not flat. It's a globe. And you don't even have to go into space to see it. You could just use your mind and reason. right? Shadows, ships in the water. There are ways you can look without ever going up into space and go, this doesn't make sense if the earth is flat, but it does make sense if the earth is a globe, if there's a curve to the earth. So now, almost all human beings, except for the Flat Earth Society, cuckoo, right? Right? Who are real people. There's a lot of very strange people out there, right? So if thousands of years human beings thought that the earth was flat, and now we realize through evidence and reason that we were wrong, then maybe you can make the argument against religion. For thousands of years, people felt God in their life, but now that we use evidence and reason and scientific thinking, we now realize they're wrong. People could make that argument. I don't believe in that argument, but it's an argument that people can make, and you need to know how to answer it. I'm not saying you should answer other people. You should know how to answer for yourself. You have to know what to answer the Apikoros. The rabbi says, which Apikoros? The Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara inside of us is the main Apikoros we have to deal with, not the external ones. Don't worry. Leave those to me. I'll deal with those guys. You just worry about yourself, unless you want to go into this as a profession. We always need good people. All right. What's the other type of knowledge? The type of knowledge that is not about your experience. The other type of knowledge is what we would call evidential. Evidential. Did I spell that right? I have no idea. And this is what we started to talk about already. I just took a step back to show you both. It's knowledge. I say this is true because I have enough evidence to say it's true. We started to talk about this in terms of the mitzvah to believe Hashem. We started to talk about this exact same idea this morning in the Benos Bina class. So there's a little bit of overlap with this, obviously, but that's fine. Whenever you want to know something, there's only one way to approach knowledge. Either I know it because I felt it, I know it because I experienced it, or I know it because it makes sense. This is it makes sense. What's the advantage of evidential knowledge compared to experiential knowledge?
It's transferable.
It's transferable, right? Right away we see it is transferable. Because how do I transfer it to you? I make an argument. That's how I transfer knowledge to you. I make an argument. I say, here's the evidence, and I believe that this view of reality better explains the evidence. You know, I think the easiest example, I'm going to erase the ABC part, the review from last week. Right? The best example I always give to show, like really simple, real down to earth. Whoopsies. Right? You wake up in the morning, and you wake up and you look out of your window, and what do you see? You see your car, and your car is wet. Okay? What?
The car took a bath.
Right? So, what are the possibilities? You guys in my Benos Bina class, you may remember I used this example before, right? What are the different possibilities, right? 1, let's say, it rained. 2, someone washed my car. And 3, sprinklers. Okay? All of these are reasonable. But how would you go about seeing which one it was? By looking at other evidence. Wet car could be answered by all 3. Wet car plus no clouds and sun in sky. Maybe it rained but the clouds went away? Could be, but so quickly? Okay. So this one might be against rain, but it wouldn't be against the other ones. Right? What if there's, you look at other cars on the block, right? And they're all dry. All these cars are dry. Well, that's definitely against rain. And it might be against sprinkler also, because I only have a sprinkler on my lawn, unless all the sprinklers in the neighborhood are all like going at the same time. I don't know. I've never owned a house. I don't have a lawn. I don't know how sprinklers work. You guys know better than me. Do sprinklers like all go off at the same time?
No,
like on a block?
No?
Okay. Right? And then you look and you go, oh, there's a chair and a bucket of soapy water and a sponge and wet footsteps. Right?
It's like 2 hours.
But so here's the thing. It's now, so what do you say? I know someone washed my car. But do you know with 100% certainty? No. What's a possible scenario where it wasn't the fact that someone washed your car? Go ahead.
I have no idea.
Just think about it. How would this have happened, but no one washed your car?
Someone washed someone else's car.
Esther, give us a...
No.
Okay, fine. Wait, go again?
Going to wash your car.
But
you're already wet.
They were about to wash my car. That's very good, simple. Somebody sat down with a bucket of water ready to wash my car, and then it rained. He went, oh, all right. And he walked away, and he left the bucket. Is that a possibility?
Yes, but
Right?
the other cars aren't wet.
Maybe it was a very small cloud. No, but you begin to see why it's a more problematic theory, because you have to say it rained, but only on my car, and the person came to wash my car just before it rained, and then they left. But too many things need to be also true. It's less simple. It's a more complicated answer than it just rained. Okay, good. This is how all evidential knowledge works. When you go to a court case and the prosecuting attorney says that this person is guilty of X, and the defense attorney says they are innocent of X, and then they provide evidence to the jury, and the jury now has to look back and forth and say which bunch of evidence is better explained by guilty and which is better explained by innocent, and what, now we weigh it out and we make a judgment. All of life is like that. All life is like that. Now, these two, in a perfect world, will bounce off of each other. Because since I might be fooling myself, I could be fooling myself. I felt Hashem in my life. But how do I know that that was really Hashem I felt and not just a figment of my imagination? So then I look at the evidential knowledge, and do I see that it makes sense that there's a creator and that creator does reach out and have people experience his presence? Yeah, let's say, for argument's sake. There is sufficient evidence for God's existence, and there is sufficient evidence that God does provide experience to human beings of his presence. So that means I don't have to be, I could still be wrong. It could be there is a God and he still didn't talk to me. Right? But at least now I know that it's not crazy. It's possible I felt God in my life. So now I don't have to worry about it as much. Right? And also vice versa. I could bring you evidence for something that doesn't feel right. The fact that it doesn't feel right doesn't 100% prove it's wrong, but it does make you go, let me think more. Let me ask more. I'll give you an example. My Rosh Hashiva used to give the example of, imagine a guy comes up to you and he says, hey, I can prove to you that you're a flying monkey. How would you respond?
Let's hear it.
Right, that's what I would respond. I'm like, okay, I got time, go for it. This is cool. So the guy says, do you agree with me, premise A? Yeah, makes sense. Very reasonable premise. Do you agree with premise B? Yes. Do you agree with premise C? Yep, everything's logical. Good. Well, based on A and B and C being true, would it not make sense, step one? Yep, I don't see any problem with your logic. And based on step one being true, would not step two be true? Yeah. And then he goes through, there's his axioms, his premises, his givens, and then takes you through logical steps until eventually by step 30 he goes, and voila, I've now proved to you you're a flying monkey. And you're sitting there going, hot damn, that was really cool. This dude just proved to me I'm a flying monkey. In a flawless progression of logic and reason that I can't find any flaws in.
Yeah, but also like the Holocaust. People can
Hold on. Let me finish the story, and then I'll talk about that, because you're bringing up a very, very good point, which dovetails nicely off this one. And then afterwards, you say to the guy, you go, that was really amazing. I'm so impressed. I got to write this down and tell my friends. And the guy goes, what are you talking to me for? Just flap your wings and get out of here, you flying monkey. Like, the fact that a person proved to you you're a flying monkey, but then you look at yourself and go, I'm not a flying monkey, right? Right? So evidence is also not flawless. Evidentiary knowledge is not flawless. It's possible. There are lots of places that you might not be seeing the mistake. Maybe one of the premises, the givens, was too broad, and you just didn't know enough on how to narrow it sufficiently. Or maybe it was just wrong entirely, but you took it for granted. Or maybe one of the steps made sense to you, but you didn't realize that there was a logical flaw in that step. You know how many intellectual biases we have? I think the last time I looked at Wikipedia, it was like 48 officially recognized intellectual biases by psychologists. Something like that, some ridiculously large number. Right? For example, there's something called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means that we're more likely to believe things that agree with the things we already believe. That's why most people who are Republicans watch Fox News. And most people who are Democrats watch CNN. And it's rare to find someone who's a Republican who watches equal amounts of CNN and Fox News and vice versa. Because we are psychologically comforted by things that agree with the stuff we think is true already. That's a human bias, right? Right? Like, me, I grew up an atheist. I'm a vegan. Sorry, I made a joke with the ladies this morning. I said, being someone who's about tshuva, it's like a vegan. Like, anyone who's a vegan, within 30 seconds of meeting them, they're a vegan. It's like, hi, I'm vegan. Like, thanks. So about tshuva the same way. It's like, hi, I used to be an atheist. Right? It's very similar. So if you would have said to me when I was 15 years old, like, there's a God who created the world, and he has certain demands of you. There's certain things you're allowed to do and certain things you're not allowed to do. So certain things you have to do and certain things you're not allowed to do. At 15 years old, I would have been like, nah. Why am I saying that? You haven't shown me the evidence yet. Because I don't want it to be true. I don't want you to tell me what to do. And I don't want you to tell me the things I'm not allowed to do that I'm enjoying doing. That's normal. That's human nature. So that's confirmation bias. Okay, that's one example. Look it up one day on Wikipedia, like biases, and there's so many. And then you go look at them, and you know the idea of being a hypochondriac? Like you think you have all these different diseases? Once you look up the list of biases, you get like, oh my God, I'm so biased. I do that, and I do that, and I do that, and I do that, and I do that. Oh my God, like, do I know anything? Yeah. Don't go too crazy, but it is cool to see. All right, so your experiential knowledge can be supported by looking at the evidence of the world, and the evidentiary thought process can be held in check from going too far and too crazy by your experiences. So you're grounding, you're basing your life on your experience, because that's the most thing you have to base. How do you know that evidence works? Because you've experienced it. So this is primary. This is number one, because this only works because you feel that it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The only reason logic, evidence, reason, and evidence-based thinking works for you is because you feel and you've experienced that it works. And so this is step one. This is your base. Because as a baby, all you have is experience, right? You only come into reason and logic later. How do you know 1 + 1 = 2? Because you've seen apple. 2 apples, right? Right? But in a vacuum, if you were just like born, hello, right? And I don't know why if you're born out of nowhere you're suddenly gay. But if you're just like born, hi, I'm from San Francisco, hello. I don't know why, but and you're like 1 + 1 = 2. But how do you know? You get. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's late. Okay. That's not usually a joke I would say at Benazbina. My apologies. All right, it's more of a rage joke. Okay. You okay? Sorry, not sorry. Okay. Good. So as we go through our exploration of our beliefs, of Judaism, of Torah, you always need to keep both of these in mind. And what is the most important for Torah? What is the most important type of experiential knowledge that exists that we base Torah on?
Yes.
What is the most important type of experiential knowledge? I'm not saying it's your experiential knowledge. I'm just saying the most important type of experiential knowledge. Huh? Matan Torah.
They were there.
Yes, absolutely. But what was Matan Torah?
A revelation.
What does that mean?
Realization, then entire world
600,000
experienced it.
I'm not saying, you're right. I'm not saying that. I'm saying to each individual person, what did they experience? What do we call that? So what do we call that? What do we call that when Hashem speaks to you? Nevuah. Nevuah, which one is it? Is Nevuah based on evidence or is it experiential? It's experiential. You experience Nevuah. So why should I believe your Nevuah?
Right, like we weren't there.
I mean, you have to be they're never checker.
Good.
Right,
Very, very good.
It's the fact that so many people experienced it.
Good. So once again, what do we see? It's the experience, but we have to check it. It's so fascinating, right? Because I didn't experience Har Sinai. Well, I mean, maybe my neshama did, but me, this person, David Goldstein, right now, did not experience Har Sinai. So how do I know Har Sinai happened? Because of evidence. So what you wind up having is these bounce off each other. The most important thing we could have is the experience that we had at Har Sinai of Nevuah. Because without that, there's no Torah. I mean that both literally and literally there's no Torah because there was no Har Sinai for Hashem to give us a Torah, but also in terms of our belief. I don't believe Torah if there's no Har Sinai. Why should I believe Torah? So we then go through the evidence. Jewish people have existed for thousands of years with the story that we all received the Torah at Har Sinai thousands of years ago. We see that no other human beings in early human history ever had a story like this. The Torah says that no other human beings are ever going to have a story like this. And so on and so forth. It's a whole class. You may have experienced the class. I gave you guys that class, right? Right. So there's a whole class on Ma'amad Har Sinai, which then tells you that the experience they had was real. Good. So then why do we listen to any other Navi? Why do you listen to... So now we know why we listen to Moshe.
What's the problem?
So why do we listen to any other Navi?
Why can't we?
I wasn't at Har Eval, or what was the one that the Eliyahu Navi, Carmel. Thank you. I wasn't at Har Carmel when Eliyahu Navi did it. I was only at one mountain, Har Sinai.
We had enough evidence that clearly Hashem could speak to people, so why not?
Okay, the fact that he could, and that is useful. That is useful. That it might have happened, but there's a mitzvah to listen to the Navi. So should I listen to the Navi? Why do I have to listen to the Navi? I don't necessarily believe him.
Because it's the same Torah that was given by the people who said it.
In other words, the only reason I listen to any other Navi is because Moshe tells me. The basis of all the other Nevi'im, of listening to them, is this Nevuah. This Nevuah is the basis of all the other Nevi'im. And we have a system to test Nevi'im. There's a system to test. How do we know that this Navi is true? We test them. Who tells us how to test them? Moshe. Right? It's all coming back to that experience of Har Sinai. Everything is based on it. So what we find is that you really need both. For everything. In your own personal life right now, you need to find a proper balance between your experience and what your reason tells you. You can make a mistake either way, but you minimize your chance of making a mistake overall by double checking on both sides. I'll use my reason to check my experience, and I use my experience to check my reason. It's kind of like the United States, government system of checks and balances, right? You've got your left brain, you've got your right brain, to oversimplify, and they check each other to make sure. Is it still possible that you're going to make so many mistakes that you're just wrong on, even though you have both sides? Yeah, of course it's possible, but we do our best. We do our best. And what's left to help you if you make a mistake on both sides? What's left to help you? Other people. Other people are there to help you. Hey, you know what you just said? That was crazy. And you're like, no, it wasn't. Right? When somebody tells you you're saying something crazy or weird or dumb or silly or mistaken, it makes sense to take a moment and go, why do you think that? And after they tell you, you go, no, I think you didn't hear me correctly. It's not what I meant. Or okay, right. But, another person tells you. Now, again, that's also a check, but it's also not perfect. Because maybe you're right and they're all wrong. Avraham Avinu, Avraham HaIvri, he stood against the whole world. They all told him he's wrong. He said, no, he's right anyway. So you have really 3 checks. So it really is like the U.S. government, right? You have your left, your right, and then you have the external. You have other people. Okay, somebody had a hand up? I thought I saw a hand up. All right.
Question, actually.
Yes.
Let's say we're Ahava Hashem, right?
Yeah.
You're saying it's real, but if I never experienced it, how am I supposed to prove it's true? Only on the evidence.
Let's say, here's a way of looking at it. Let's say you have never and cannot ever see the color green. And one person after another is pointing at leaves in the trees and saying, oh, they're so beautiful, they're so green. And you're like, well, I don't know what that is. So at some point you say, like, everybody sees this. Is it it's possible they're all crazy. Green doesn't exist. They're all nuts. I'm a green denier, right? And they're all green conspiracy theorists, It's possible. But I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. Unless I had really good evidence that there is no green, then it makes sense to say, I must be missing something right now. I'm not seeing it. But the fact that so many other people are, it's probably they're right and I'm missing something. So if somebody sees that there are people who they talk about and they tell you about their own experiences of Avas Hashem, Avos Yisrael, or whatever it is, you're using the Ava as the example, but you could use any example in Judaism, and you're like, yeah, but I never experienced it. I said, okay, that's fair. But what's more likely? That your lack of experiencing it is pointing to the truth that it doesn't exist, and those people who say it exists are fooling themselves? That's a possibility. Or is it that they are experiencing it, and your lack of experience is something that you're missing and that maybe you could work on? Which seems more likely, right? Question?
I have a back and forth question.
Sure.
It could be this, it could be you say, how do we know, so everyone was there, but how do we know that everyone just was, people were maybe just scared to say, they didn't see it?
It's a good question. Maybe, oh wow, Har Sinai, and people are like, oh yeah, right, yeah, oh yeah, right. Well, I could hear that. It's a possibility. So, the answer to that question is really the answer to any type of question like that. There's one question that answers thousands of questions. If what you're saying is a good question, I know it's good intellectually. What I mean is if it's powerful, right? Then the conclusion to your question is the Jewish people faked somehow a national revelation event. And that's a different argument. Also a good one. It's a good argument, but not the one I was going to. If it's possible for the Jews to have faked it, then my reason would tell me then I would expect to see it to have happened more than once in history. Why are the Jewish people the only ones who have ever made a national revelation claim when, if it's possible to fake it, I expect it to have been faked more than once? Now, it's possible that we're just the only ones who got lucky and faked it. Just nobody else ever did it. But 5,000 religions over 10,000 years, no one else even. And not only that, but the Christians and the Muslims, who are half the people in the world, they're like, oh yeah, it happened to the Jews. Millions of Jews. They totally agree with our story. Why didn't they argue with it? Why didn't they say, no, they're wrong? My friend Rabbi Ibrahimov, I was just on the phone with him before I came in here. He brought up a similar point. He said, we don't see any evidence of any ancient civilization saying that the Jews were liars and everything they're saying is wrong. Oh, the Jews didn't go to Mount Sinai. They didn't leave Egypt. No one says this. Not the Babylonians, not the Assyrians, not the Egyptians. No one ever complains the Jews made this stuff up. Is that 100% evidence? No, of course not. But it's no one's got a counter? Because it's too big. Everyone saw it. No one cared?
Why doesn't then everybody be Jewish?
The atheists.
That's an interesting question.
And then why are there so many people that believe in nothing? They don't believe in Christians, Muslims, no nothing. They're just
Because they have evidence, I guess.
there's no evidence.
Yeah.
It's not because they have evidence. It's because
They don't want to be
one of the most powerful sukkim in Chumash is the idea that you shouldn't bribe a judge, right? Because a bribe twists the reason of a judge. So the rabbis point out that who's the judge in our life? Our reason. My reason is what judges. I judge everything around me with my reason. What's the bribery that could bribe my reason? You'd see it's a hurrah. Hey, if you think this is true instead of that, you get XYZ, pleasure, honor, money, blah, blah. There was a famous American thinker who said, one of the hardest things to do is convince someone of the truth if the way they make their money is by not knowing that truth. It's a tough one. Did I tell you the story about the girl who... I think I told you the story. I had a girl who came to me years ago at Rage, and after months of classes, she was like, Rabbi, this really seems true to me. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's pretty crazy, right? She's like, I have a really big dilemma. I'm like, what is it? She goes, I'm an adult dancer. Wow. Wow. And she's like, and I'm like, am I allowed to do that? And I'm like, no. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you. And she's like, okay. And she quit. She quit. It's one of those great stories. Went to seminary, now she's married, kids, from life. It's like mind-boggling. People make a lot of money sometimes. Like crazy money sometimes. She gave it up. But not everyone is able to do that easily. It's like, money, power, respect. Can you imagine being like a professional atheist? Getting up there, there's no God, religious people are stupid, right? And I come along and I'm like, Professor, here's evidence from Mama Har Sinai. You think their mind is going to easily accept it? Of course not. So we have to try to be honest with ourselves. Not so easy. Okay, and this helps to bounce it off. Look at the reason. What am I experiencing? What's going on? How can I bounce it off? Okay, good. So ultimately, the truth, which is reality, Hashem Elokeichem Emes, Emes means reality. The way to grasp reality as a whole is through a combination of your own experience and using your reason to go through the evidence and see what makes the most sense. When you're speaking to other people, you cannot give them experiences, but you can make arguments. You can make arguments, and you can show evidence, and you can counter back and forth. I'll tell you a quick story. Do you have time for this story? Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. I was teaching in Aisha Torah's Essentials classroom in the old city of Yerushalayim. This is back in 2004 or 5, something like that. And I told the following story in the class. It's a story within a story. It's story inception, right? I said, there was a guy who came here, and he was like this atheist who had degrees in comparative religion and philosophy. He was like super well educated, and he had gone to every major religion in the world and said, show me your evidence, and beat them all. And now he's on his final stop in Yerushalayim at Aisha Torah. This is it. This is the last place he's going. And he walked in the door, and they pointed him to my rabbi. They're like, yeah, go to him, he knows. And he sat down in front of the rabbi and said, Rabbi, this is my story. You're the last person I have in the entire planet Earth to prove to me God is true and religion is true. Go. And my rabbi was, I was in the middle of studying Gemara 2 seconds earlier. Like, I didn't know what to say. It was so, like, abrupt and unexpected. No preparation. Just got through. So Hashem gave me what to say, and I said to him, look, I don't have the time right now to have a discussion. Maybe you want to come back tomorrow. I can set aside time for you. But I do have one question I'd like you to think about. If I do prove it to you, how would you feel about that? That was all he said. The next day, the guy came back, and he clearly hadn't slept. He's like bags under his eyes, a little disheveled, a little shaky. Hey, Rabbi, I spent all night thinking about what you said. And I really thought about it, and I agonized over it, and I finally realized, like, you're right. If you proved it to me, I'd be miserable. I would hate that you proved it to me. And then I said, but that's not logic. The fact that I have an emotional experience against what you're saying is not logic. And so once I saw that, I opened up all my notes, and I went through all the discussions I'd had for years, and I came to the conclusion that all these people had been bringing good arguments, but I had been refusing to see them. And now, you're right, and thank you, and he left. So I told that story in a room full of people. I finished the story, finished the class, and one of the rabbis who was watching, because I was training to be a rabbi, so I had a rabbi observer watching me. And he said to me, David, did you know who was in your class? I said, no, I came in to teach your class. He goes, the guy in the back, not the same guy, but the guy in the back was a guy who had degrees in comparative religion and philosophy, and he was searching for truth, and he came to this class, and you told that story. Like, what are the odds of a guy being exactly the same as the person that I mentioned in the story, being in the class on the exact day that I said that story? That's kind of crazy. No, it's not.
Not with degrees of comparative.
Most atheists are atheists because of the way they grew up and because they're ignorant, not because they thought it through. There are very few well-educated, thoughtful atheists. They're rare. They exist, but they're rare. Now, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. That could be. I had a guy once who said, in the middle of Aisha Torah to my friend Rav Gav Friedman. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Rav Gav. He's pretty famous. He said, Rabbi, I'm an atheist. And I knew this guy for like a year already. He never said it to me. He just waited to get to Jerusalem to say it to my friend. I was like, okay. And Rav Gav, if you've ever seen him teach, you know how he's like. He literally jumps on the table. An atheist? So exciting. I never get to meet you guys. He's like, he sits on the edge of the table, like bouncing his feet like a little kid. He's all excited. He's like, so tell me, did you read Benedict Spinoza on ethics? I was like, no. He goes, oh, well, did you read Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason? He goes, no. Well, did you read Friedrich Nietzsche, The Death of God? No. He goes, oh. You said you're an atheist. You're an atheist. You're just ignorant. Every time I go in with a group of students, to Aisha Torah in Yerushalayim and I see Rav Gav, I'm like, do you remember that guy? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I tell that story all the time. It's great. I wish it happened to me. That's a great story. Anyway, sometimes I say it as if it was me. I steal the story sometimes. Yeah.
We had somebody that was religious and nobody told them. So they had that education that God has given them through their own realization.
So there's a lot to say there. My experience with people like that is, number one, they generally did not have a good education of what the evidence was pro. They kind of grew up with it. It makes sense more or less, and then for whatever reason, they really delved into the evidence against. And then maybe they went back to the rabbis, but not every rabbi is an expert in these topics. And so they didn't get the answers that they felt that they needed. And then they went off. But even that's pretty rare. The vast majority of people that go off are not going off because of evidence or lack thereof. There are other factors that are much more powerful. Generally speaking, abuse, family, right? I'm not judging. I'm not. I don't know what I would do in that situation.
Like, why do they choose if they go through people's stuff? I feel like they always choose.
Because if your experience of life is pain, suffering, and abuse, then it's very easy to say that, hey, Hashem, you're in charge. You let this happen. You must not like me either. I would never judge. I can't imagine what I would do in that scenario. So we have to, the best way to do kiruv with people who are off the derech is through love and acceptance, not through logic and arguments. You need logic and arguments. I'm not saying ignore them, but that's not what's going to bring most of them back. It might open the door for them to come back. Like, look, it makes sense. But then you have to invite them in, bring them for Shabbos, show them you care, show them that they're really important, show them Hashem loves them. That's what works. Same thing with raising children. It's no different. It's like you're doing kiruv on your kids from the time they're born. Used to be somebody went off, people would sit shiva. That doesn't work. We know that. Almost nobody does that anymore because that doesn't bring them back. They're just gone. Are you okay with your kid being gone? Okay, so sit shiva. You want them to come back? You have to try something else. Okay. So what we've been talking about this whole time, our primary topic is how do you know what you know? How do you know what's real? We've discussed the interface between reason, logic, and evidence and your experience of the world. I am teaching a class. Go away. I have to figure out how to stop people from calling me while I'm recording. All right. So when we approach Torah, we approach Judaism, it's the same thing. We have to use exactly the same thing. We have to ask ourselves, how do I know it's real? How do I know it's true? What evidence do I have for it? Have you ever heard the expression, nobody ever died of Akasha? Right? It doesn't mean that nobody was ever buried under hundreds of pounds of food from Russia called kasha, right? A kasha, of course, means a difficult question, right? There's a Yiddish expression. I don't know it in Yiddish. I only know nachas and tuchas. That's why I know in Yiddish. So if somebody has a challenge, a difficult question, there's a Yiddish expression. Nobody ever died from a kasha. Meaning the fact that you had a kasha doesn't mean like your Judaism is over. Like I once heard a story about a kid. As far as I know, it's a real story that when he was 13 or 14, he went down to his basement in his house on Shabbos and he lit a match. And looked around, nothing happened, and he went off to derech. Really? What were you expecting? You're light a match and then you hear a giant no. Yeah, the ceiling opens and Hashem looks down going, I see you. Step it. Just step it. Clearly, his Jewish education and experience up until that point already had gaps, right? So that's obviously ridiculous. But even when you get a little more sophisticated, somebody comes and says, "Oh, I'll give you what's the most famous kasha in all of human history?" Exactly. Hashem is good, we say. That means He wants good for you. He's all powerful, we say. That means He can do whatever He wants. He's all knowing, we say. That means He knows everything going on with you. But yet bad things happen. Kasha. It's a very famous kasha. It even has its own name. It's called theodicy, or the problem of evil in philosophy. A lot of time is spent on this. So a person gets up, says this, and you're like, okay, it's a good question. So now what? Do you want to learn about it? Do you want to think about it? Do you want to study the Sfarim? Do you want to explore it? Or are you done? Right? So I had a kasha, I'm out now, What are you rushing to? However, I do have to admit that if you get enough kashas, and they're big enough, you add them all together, that's like our Joshua Pearl story. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Too many things don't make sense. You know something's fishy. If you brought enough kashas on Yiddishkeit, like anything else, you would destroy it too. I should say this. If you brought enough unanswered kashas can have answers. If you have brought enough answers, if you have brought enough kashas that nobody had any good answer for, and another, then you start to wonder, maybe the whole thing is shtus. People leave Christianity all the time because they go, this is stupid. There's too many problems with this. I left atheism because of a combination of too many problems with atheism and the positive evidence for Judaism. Those two things together. I remember one of the very first things I did when I first went, wait a second, is it possible that there's a God? Really? Well, wait a second. What do you think I would say? 19 years old, college student, relatively well educated for a 19-year-old. There's a God. What about? No. Although, I would have to admit that as a 19-year-old, if the first thing you said to me was hey, Shomer Negiah, I'd be I don't know. I get that, right? You don't tell that to a 19-year-old boy who doesn't know anything better. It's not the first thing you open up your mouth with, But no, that wasn't my problem.
What do bad things happen to good people?
No, that didn't bother me at the time. That came later.
People dying?
No, but that's really the same category. Why do bad things happen, right?
I said, can you give us a hint?
It has to do with something scientific.
Evolution.
Evolution. Big Bang Theory wasn't the first one. It definitely was a question, but that was say number 2. My very first question was, wait a second. My whole life, what did I learn in school? Evolution. From the time I'm a kid. And I love science. I read all the books, right? And so I go, wait. If God, what about monkeys? That's kind of but and so what did I do? I said, okay, let me now. I have to reconcile this kasha. I have to reconcile it. So I went and I said, are there any books that tackle this question? And people were like, yes, a lot of them. Even back in 1997, there were a lot. Now there's so much more.
Is it from the Jewish side or from the other side?
Both. Read all the perspectives. You got to balance everything out. So I did. I was like, okay, not by chance by Lee Drosnin, Darwin's Black Box by Michael Behe, Signature in the Cell by Stephen Mayer. One book after another, after another, after another. I read a ton of books. I'm a big nerd. I read a lot, right? So I go through these books, and I'm like, wow. Evolution, a Theory in Crisis by Michael Denton, written in 1983. There were people challenging evolution from a scientific perspective for decades. How come nobody told me in school? No one ever told me that, evolution... Well, actually, there's a lot of controversy by scientists, not by crazy religious freaks. Scientists have a problem with evolution. Never knew about it. No one ever told me about it. No one ever exposed me to that information. But I found it on my own, and then I read it, and I was like, wow, evolution is not a very good theory. Scientifically, it's not a good theory. It's got a lot of problems. And so then I explored more, and then I explored Big Bang, Age of the Universe, and all that stuff from a Jewish perspective, from a scientific perspective, from a Kabbalistic perspective. What do the Kabbalists say about this stuff? From a philosophical perspective, what does the Rambam say? What does the Ramban say? I was learning and studying, and I came out with a lot of wow. Every single kasha I have ever had the pleasure of seeing on Torah, on Judaism, I've seen good answers for. There are a couple that are it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I don't know. You kind of have to stretch it a little, but not many. Biggest kasha. You want to hear my biggest kasha? Are you okay with that? Okay. Just don't complain to me I made you a fry person. My biggest kasha is the flood. Torah says the flood was all over the world, less than 6,000 years ago. But the pyramids are older than that. What are you saying? That all the Egyptians, the pyramids were made by the Egyptians before the flood, and then they got wiped out, and then they came back? Or were the pyramids after? There were civilizations that went right through when the flood was supposed to happen, and they didn't stop. But I thought all humanity was wiped out. That's one answer. And that's a perfectly legitimate answer to give. I'm not convinced by it.
I heard you can't date rocks.
Well, it depends. Are they putting on makeup? Are they...
Nowadays.
Yeah, right. Now it's not even a stretch. I love the geos, the rocks. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
When you see how old things are,
So I'm not convinced that that's a problem. My study of dating technology, no pun, is. Yeah, no. That's what I said. No pun. I'm jumping. My study of the technology is that it's real. It works. You can date rocks. You can look at it. Okay. You can determine scientifically the age of stone.
So wait, are there any other answers besides that their dating could be wrong?
I'll tell you my favorite answer, but I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna let you know right now. I'm gonna let you know. Actually, I'll tell you my two favorite answers. I have two answers, but you're not gonna like either one of them from an easy grew up with Judaism perspective. One answer is, sorry.
Your kasha's making me nervous.
There's nothing to be nervous about because
then what happened?
So hold on. First of all, I told you that you need more than one kasha to throw away Judaism. You need a lot of kashas. You have to weigh it until together. If all you've got is the flood, and the only thing I have that I think is problematic is the flood, okay, so I just don't have an answer yet, right? If you had the flood plus this, then you start to get a little shaky. I don't think this is worth being shaky at all. That being said, I still have answers. So one answer I have is that there is one of the Tanoim, that means one of Chazal, one of the rabbis in the Talmud, says that the flood didn't happen all over the world. That the Torah was not being literal. The flood only happened in Eretz Yisrael.
What?
That is an opinion of a rabbi in the Talmud. So, let's say, did you know about that before? Most people didn't, because they don't teach this in school. And so, you might be able to say, yeah, that's fine, because you can't know everything. When you're a kid, you're brainwashed. That's normal.
Yeah, but when you're in 12th grade, you should know something. You think that you're not 12.
But you're not going to think of this question.
I'm not going to blame the people in high school. I think that it makes sense to not say everything in high school. High school kids, girls or boys, are not necessarily very mature and ready to hear things. It's fine. You're in seminary. Now you can get it. And so this is the right time. And so you could say, look, I rely upon the opinion that the flood was not worldwide to answer this kasha. Now, I said this in front of a shul once, and somebody went to one of the greatest rabbis in Brooklyn, Rabbi Pluchuk, and went to him and said, Rabbi Goldstein said this. He ratted me out. And what do you think about the fact that Rabbi Goldstein said this? And I'll tell you what Rabbi Pluchuk said. He's a great rabbi, one of the biggest Talmidei Chachamim in Brooklyn, massive, he's huge, lovely guy. He says, look, if Rabbi Goldstein said it with humility, I don't know, but it could be this, then he's not an apikoros. That's how he put it. That's how he said it.
That's not your opinion anyways, it's from a Tana.
I know. But the fact, we don't usually publicize minority opinions of the Talmud, which I find a little odd, but I'm an outsider. I was an atheist. I'm a vegan, right? I came from the outside, so I'm not bothered by saying, well, this is what they say. But people who grow up with it are a little more hesitant to publicize because they feel like people might get the wrong idea. I understand that. I would rather say, this is what it says. What do you think? That's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. That's one answer. There's an opinion in the Talmud that it wasn't worldwide. But for 2,000 years since the Talmud was written, we didn't hold by that opinion. We held by the majority opinion that the flood is worldwide. Okay. That means, what am I saying? I'm saying that you might argue that the majority opinion was wrong. Now you know why people want to call me an apikoros. But there's a minority opinion to rely upon. That's one answer. I have another answer for you. And I think this one might be more, for some people, might be more palatable. Might be easier to swallow. It's similar to your answer, actually. It's not that we have a hard time dating the rocks. It's that we don't necessarily know. I just got to ignore it at this point. I get it. It's late. Yeah, the coffee's worn off by now. Not every timeline of the Torah is clear that it's exactly correct. And that's well understood. We don't know it's exactly. We have a year, 5783. Is that what we said we were in? Right? Did I say the year right? Yeah. No, we're in 5783. But we didn't start counting in Chumash. The rabbis created the calendar in the times of the Gemara. They put together based on the Sfarim, what we said. We're confident we're pretty close, but we might be off by 100 or 200 years in the date, right? Right? We don't know for sure it's exactly 5783, which I always laugh at. People are like, according to the Kabbalah, Mashiach has to come by 6,000, and therefore we're this number of years away. I'm like, dude, you don't even know what year it is, okay? Calm down. Not exactly. So, the dating, and okay, now, that's one information. The date is not...
It really isn't necessarily
Is what you're wearing.
It's the rabbis we don't have a Masorah from Har Sinai, from Moshe Rabbeinu, what year it is. The rabbis calculated the year.
I don't understand what's the point of being so secretive.
Which part?
The year. Like, why can't I just write in Torah, this is now the year?
Because why should we decide to count years?
No, but that's why, because it makes it a lot easier.
But that's a human invention of more recent times. The ancient peoples never counted years. They counted from how many years. They counted how many years since the latest king came to power. That's all they cared about.
But it says when everyone died and like ages, so you can figure out.
Yeah, right. And that's what they did.
So why do we
But you think from when...
So it might be we're off a little bit, and that's fine. That's okay. The reason why I'm saying it's fine is because that gives us a little bit of wiggle room to say, like, if you're not seeing this, you're not seeing that. You have room to maneuver. Right? But I'll give you a better answer in addition to that. I think it's a better answer. There's one Talmud that says, you might like this one, another Talmud you may never have heard of, that there's not going to be 6,000 years of history. There's going to be, and 1,000 years of after history, right? The 7,000 years. There's what you know what I'm going to say?
It's like the 6 times of it, like the multiple.
Yeah, there are 7 cycles. Just like Shemitah and Yovel, there's 7 cycles of 7 years. There are 7 cycles of 7,000. And then there's a machlokes amongst the people that hold by that. Are we in the 2nd cycle? Are we in the 6th cycle? Are we in the 7th cycle? So when you actually look in the Gemara to see our aging...
I heard it, I don't like it.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're way too far away.
Most guys never learned all this either.
Mashiach is coming is like lying.
And what about the opinion of another Tana who says that there is no Mashiach as a person? Okay, We don't hold by now, and that's why people have a problem with my flood answer. We don't hold by minority opinions. The question is, according to whom do we not hold by minority opinions? By the majority opinion. It's like, who is the humblest person who ever lived? Moshe. And who wrote that down? Moshe. It's fine. It's okay. We're going to be fine. When Mashiach does come, or not, we'll get answers. We'll get answers to everything. It's like the famous joke, the Jew and the Christian are arguing about Jesus is Mashiach or not, and this little old Jewish man comes and he says to the Jew, he says, "You believe Mashiach is coming?" "Yeah." "Hey, Christian, you believe Mashiach came and he's going to come again?" "Yeah." "So why are you arguing? Just wait till he gets here and you ask him, 'Excuse me, were you here before?'"
What are you fighting for?
Up there and it didn't even happen.
They don't.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, did I tell you that one?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies. I'm sorry. Sadly, my time is coming to an end. I do have another appointment I have to run to. I think what I want to leave you with is that I want you to be comfortable with a certain level of not knowing. I think that that's a very good place. That's literally the A of Judaism that I said to you last time. You need to be comfortable with a lack of complete certainty. Because if you need complete certainty, since life does not provide complete certainty, you will be left with two problems to choose from. Either lying to yourself that something is true even though you're not actually convinced that it's true, or just shutting yourself off from reality, hiding within a small little box of things you can be certain of and not being a full person. On the other hand, if you're comfortable with a little bit of doubt and a little bit of uncertainty, you go, "Okay, I don't know. What do you think? Show me the evidence. Let's reason it out. Oh, he argues in that? That's totally cool. Enjoy the process," right? When you do learn new things, it becomes exciting because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I'm learning more, I'm getting more clarity, I'm getting a new question, and then things get like the chessboard thrown up in the air again. You're like, whoa, a whole new way of looking at things. This is so cool. And then you explore all over again. It really opens the door to a very joyous exploration of knowledge, of life, of Judaism, etc. I like that. For me, I think it's so much more fun than somebody who's just like in their box. This is all true. Leave me alone. You're gonna burn in hell. Like that. I don't think that that's authentically Jewish at all. I understand why some of our people have been there, ghettos, persecution, etc. But that's not the way we're supposed to be.
How are you supposed to get out of the box if you grew up in that box?
By someone else taking you out of the box, reaching out to other people. What if you grew up in Neturei Karta and you think Israel is evil and should be destroyed and let all the Jews in Israel get killed by nuclear bombs because they're Chiloni and so they're not really Jewish anyway? Imagine if you were a person like that. Sorry?
People leave Neturei Karta.
I have not heard of one, but I don't know everything. I hope so. I hope some people get out. Right? It's a cult, right? It's crazy. Right? So how would you get out of Neturei Karta? Number one, you might start to see all the little cracks around the edges from inside. Number two, somebody outside and they go, "Hey, what about this?" And you go, "Oh my God, yeah, it's a good question." But again, you grew up with it, your school is there, your parents are there, everything is there. It's difficult, it's challenging. I wouldn't judge. If I grew up in Neturei Karta, I might be the most fanatical of them all. I might buy Israeli flags just to burn them, So how do you escape being within your own version of Neturei Karta, whatever it is? Millions of versions of Neturei Karta. We all have a little Neturei Karta in us, in something, right? The way you do it is by being open to the possibility that you could be wrong. And therefore, keep looking, keep thinking, keep searching, keep exploring. This is what this was, right? This is an explanation of the A. This is what the point was of this. Okay, questions to finish off.
Yeah, what did you mean if Mashiach comes or not? Say things like that. Explain it to me.
I was just making a joke based on the fact that there is one opinion in the Talmud that we do not hold by, that Mashiach is not an actual person but a historical process. But we don't hold by that opinion. We all hold that there's an actual person. Sorry? So this is what we said earlier, that when we have most rabbis hold that this is what's true, and one, that means we say what he said, he's allowed to have said it because he was a giant rabbi. But I'm not allowed to say it. And therefore I have to say what the majority of rabbis say. That means speak about it, teach it, and believe it.
Can we believe in what he said, even
No.
if the majority doesn't?
It seems like you're not allowed to. I feel comfortable mentioning that it exists so that we could have this discussion, but I feel very uncomfortable. I really don't think it's correct, even though I would like to. My personal bias is I think you should be allowed to believe whatever you want as long as you're being honest and reasonable. However, the evidence of Judaism, from what I've seen, does not agree with my personal desires. I have to be honest about it. I don't think you're allowed to believe and teach minority hashkafic opinions from Talmud. The only reason you might be allowed to is if the evidence is so overwhelmingly powerful one way or another that you kind of need to. That's why I do with the flood. The only reason I even think it might be true, a minority opinion that the flood was only in Eretz Yisrael, is because of the tremendous lack of evidence of a worldwide flood within the last 6,000 years.
There was a second flood.
Now, I will tell you something that maybe this is what you're referring to. There is an enormous amount of evidence for a flood older than 6,000 years. There's massive evidence. In fact, everyone agrees that the entire Middle East was massively flooded about 12,000 years ago, which I think not accidentally would agree with the idea that we're in the second cycle. What? I don't think that's true. Now, I might be wrong. I follow the A. If you, I would like to see what their evidence is for that, but my understanding of the evidence of how science does the system of checking the present and past time, I don't want to say the word, of rocks, I think that it's actually quite good. I think that their science is quite strong. I don't see any big problems or gaps with it that have convinced me that there's a problem with what they call carbon dating or uranium dating and stuff like that. There is a problem with using carbon to go back further than about 40,000 years. That is very problematic. But so that means 10, 20,000 years is actually quite strong. And then uranium dating is extremely strong. Right? If you look at, we see stars through our telescopes that are very far away, and we can tell exactly what elements they have in them from the spectrum of their light, and it matches perfectly what we would expect on Earth as well, which means everywhere you look in the universe, the physics and the science seems to be consistent. So for the idea that you cannot accurately date rocks, you would have to say that there's something wrong with the science and the physics, and I don't see it. I could be wrong. I will be the first one. If you want to bring me, I would be very happy to look at and explore that evidence, because at the end of the day, I have no skin in the game. If you showed me evidence and I went, hot damn, carbon dating, it doesn't make sense at all, I'll throw it out. It's fine. I don't need it. I don't need it from my Judaism. I don't need it from my belief system. I want to believe what's true. And I don't have a problem with it at this point.
Could you explain what the 7 cycles, not like what it means, so there was, the first cycle is Yaakov,
Who says that?
and then we start again.
Apparently, I can bring you the source if you remind me. I have a sefer at home that goes through the sources. So there's a source in the Gemara that says that there's not going to be 6,000 years. There's going to be 7 cycles of 7,000 years.
But where does it?
We don't hold by that.
There's an obvious factor in each one of those cycles.
That's a very good question. I have no idea. It's a really good question. Do we just do the whole thing over again? Or does it change? Or is it different people? I believe so.
Different versions of the one that Hashem
Right.
created different
Right.
versions, and then he came
It could
with
be
this
alternate
one.
reality.
Look, one thing we know for a fact is the Gemara says that Hashem created worlds and destroyed worlds before this one. We know that. The Gemara straight up says that. It says there were 974 generations before Adam. What does that mean? Now 974 plus the 26 from Adam until Moshe makes 1,000. So apparently that's important. I don't know. No idea. Okay, I have to run. I apologize. Oh my gosh, I'm late. I gotta run. Sorry? Tuesday. Bye-bye.